The first time April James saw the enigmatic stranger riding onto her neglected property, she had been too focused on the splinter embedded in her palm to notice him another painful reminder of the dilapidated fence she'd been struggling to repair since dawn. Montana Territory, 1876. 2 years had passed since influenza had claimed her husband, leaving her with a modest ranch crushing debts and a 4-year-old daughter who still asked when Papa was coming home. The townspeople of Cottonwood Springs had gradually stopped offering help, their initial sympathy fading like sunset colors against the vast prairie sky. April yanked the splinter free, wincing as a droplet of blood welled up on her calloused palm. She wiped it against her faded work dress and reached for the hammer again when the sound of approaching hoofbeats finally registered. A tall man astride a magnificent chestnut stallion pulled up to her fence line. His face was partially shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, but she could make out a strong jawline darkened by several days' stubble. "Madam," he called, touching the brim of his hat, "your fence is looking mighty precarious." April straightened, one hand shielding her eyes from the afternoon sun. "I'm aware," she replied stiffly, "and I'm fixing it." The stranger dismounted with a fluid grace that spoke of years in the saddle. Up close, she could see he was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 30 to her 27 years. His eyes were a startling shade of blue against his sun-bronzed skin. "Name's Tucker Lawson," he said, extending a hand before noticing the blood on her palm. "You're hurt." April pulled her hand back. "It's nothing, just a splinter." She didn't need another man's pity. The last time she'd accepted help from a passing stranger, he'd suggested that a pretty little thing like her should consider remarrying rather than struggling alone. "I've got plenty of experience with fences," Tucker continued, seemingly undeterred by her coldness. "Worked on ranches from Texas to Wyoming." "Mr. Lawson, I appreciate the offer, but..." A child's voice interrupted her. "Mama, Mama, look what I found!" Her daughter, Emma, came running from behind the small house, clutching something in her tiny fist. She stopped abruptly at the sight of the stranger, her excitement giving way to shyness as she ducked behind April's skirts. "Hello there, little lady," Tucker said, crouching to the child's level but maintaining a respectful distance. "What treasure did you discover?" Emma peeked out, curiosity overcoming caution. She slowly extended her hand to reveal a smooth, heart-shaped stone. "It's for Mama's collection." Tucker nodded solemnly. "That's a fine specimen. Your mama must have quite the collection." April felt a pang in her chest. Emma had invented the collection on her own, bringing her mother small tokens ever since John died, as if each gift might somehow ease her grief. "Mr. Lawson is just passing through, Emma," April said gently, placing a protective hand on her daughter's shoulder. Tucker rose to his full height. "Actually, I'm looking for work. Word in town is the Circle T Ranch is hiring hands for the season." April's brow furrowed. "Circle T, that's Thornton's place. It's another 10 miles west." "I know," Tucker replied. "Got directions in town, but thought I'd take my time getting there." His gaze swept over the struggling homestead, the weathered barn needing paint, the garden that had seen better days, the fence barely holding together. "Seems like you could use an extra set of hands for a spell." Before April could refuse again, Emma tugged at her mother's dress. "Can he stay for supper, Mama? Please, you made extra stew." April hesitated. It had been months since they'd had a guest. The isolation was wearing on both of them, though she'd never admit it aloud. "I can pay for my meal with labor," Tucker offered, gesturing to the fence. "Fair trade." There was something in his eyes that didn't match the drifters who occasionally passed through. No calculation, no hidden motive she could detect, just a straightforward offer. 2 hours of work, April conceded finally. "Then stew. After that, you continue on to Circle T before dark." Tucker's smile transformed his entire face, creating crinkles at the corners of his eyes. "Yes, madam, you won't regret it." But as April watched him roll up his sleeves and set to work with efficient movements, she wasn't so sure. It had been a long time since she'd allowed anyone close, and even this small concession felt dangerously like the beginning of something she couldn't control. The stew simmered on the stove as April kneaded dough for biscuits. Through the window, she observed Tucker working on the fence, his movements methodical and practiced. He had accomplished more in 2 hours than she could have in 2 days. Emma sat at the kitchen table, chattering as she arranged her collection of treasures: the heart-shaped stone, a blue jay feather, a piece of rose quartz, and other small wonders a child might find precious. "Mr. Tucker says his horse's name is Samson," Emma informed her mother. "He let me feed him an apple." April's hands stilled in the dough. "When did he tell you that?" "When you went to get more nails. He showed me how to hold my hand flat so Samson wouldn't bite my fingers." April frowned. She hadn't meant to leave Emma alone with a stranger, even for the few minutes she'd gone to the tool shed. "Emma, remember what we discussed about talking to people we don't know?" The little girl's face fell. "But Mr. Tucker's nice. He told me about the stars and how cowboys use them to find their way home." April sighed and resumed kneading. Tucker didn't seem dangerous, but she'd learned that appearances could be deceiving. John had been the sheriff's deputy in town before illness took him. She'd heard enough stories to be cautious. A knock at the back door interrupted her thoughts. Tucker stood there, hat in hand, the setting sun casting a golden glow around his tall frame. "Fence is done," he announced. "Reinforce the weak spots and replace the broken posts. Should hold through winter now." April wiped her hands on her apron. "Thank you, that's more than I expected," he shrugged. "Didn't seem right to leave a job half-finished." As they settled at the table, April noticed how Tucker waited for her and Emma to be seated before taking his place. He declined to start eating until she had served Emma and herself. Small courtesies that spoke of good upbringing. "This stew is excellent, Mrs. James," Tucker said after his first bite. "Best meal I've had in months." "April," she corrected, surprising herself. "You can call me April." Tucker's eyes met hers briefly, a flash of warmth passing between them. "April," he repeated, as if testing how the name felt on his tongue. The conversation flowed more easily than she'd anticipated. Tucker spoke of his travels across the Western Territories, describing landscapes and adventures that captivated Emma's imagination. He told them about growing up on a small farm in Missouri, losing his parents to a flood when he was 16 and striking out on his own. "Been wandering ever since," he admitted. "Working where I can, learning different trades." "And now you're heading to Circle T," April remarked, collecting the empty bowls. Tucker nodded. "Time to put down some roots, maybe. Can't be a drifter forever." As darkness fell, April lit the oil lamps while Tucker entertained Emma with shadow puppets against the wall. The child's delighted giggles filled the small house, a sound April realized had been far too rare lately. When Emma's eyelids began to droop, April rose to put her to bed. "Say goodnight to Mr. Lawson, Emma. He needs to be on his way." Emma's face crumpled in disappointment. "But it's dark." "Can't he stay? Please, Mama. What if wolves get him?" Tucker chuckled. "Don't you worry about me, little one. Samson and I have traveled in darker nights than this." But April found herself reluctant to send him into the night. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles away, and the path to Circle T crossed rough country. It wasn't just concern for his safety that made her hesitate, though she wouldn't acknowledge the other reasons, even to herself. "The barn has a decent sleeping area in the loft," she heard herself saying. "You're welcome to spend the night and continue on in the morning." Tucker's expression betrayed his surprise. "I don't want to impose." "It's not an imposition if I'm offering," April replied firmly. "Consider it payment for the fence work." After Emma was tucked in and April had shown Tucker to the barn, she returned to the quiet house. She moved to the small mirror hanging in her bedroom and truly looked at herself for the first time in months. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a practical bun, with strands escaping around her face. The sun had brought out freckles across her nose and cheekbones. Her hands, when she held them up to the lamplight, told the story of her struggles: calloused, cracked in places. the nails cut short for practicality. These weren't the hands of the young woman who had once played piano at the church socials. These were Survivor's hands. She wondered fleetingly what Tucker thought when he looked at her, then immediately chastised herself for the girlish thought. It didn't matter. He would be gone tomorrow, off to Circle T to start his new life while she would continue here, doing what needed to be done. Yet as she blew out the lamp and climbed into her lonely bed, April couldn't help but remember the way Tucker had looked at her across the dinner table, not with pity, but with genuine interest and respect. It had been a long time since anyone had truly seen her. Morning arrived with a gentle rain pattering against the roof. April rose early as always, stoking the fire and starting breakfast before Emma awoke. She was mixing batter for griddle cakes when a knock at the door startled her. Tucker stood on the porch, already looking trail-ready, his saddlebags slung over one shoulder. "Morning," he greeted. "Thought I'd say goodbye before heading out. Didn't want to leave without thanking you properly." April nodded, suddenly finding it difficult to meet his eyes. "There's coffee if you'd like some before you go, and I'm making griddle cakes." "I shouldn't impose further," Tucker began, but the smell of coffee and the warmth of the kitchen seemed to draw him in despite his protests. "Nonsense," April said, pouring him a cup. "Nobody should start a journey on an empty stomach." They settled into a companionable silence as April continued preparing breakfast. The rain intensified outside, drumming steadily on the roof. "Doesn't look like it's letting up," Tucker observed, glancing out the window. April followed his gaze. The path leading from her property was already turning to mud. The creek might be difficult to cross if this continues. It rises quickly during heavy rains. Tucker's expression grew concerned. "Is that the creek I crossed yesterday about a mile east of here?" April nodded. "The very same. There's a ford there, but even a few inches of rain can make it treacherous." "Perhaps I should wait out the worst of it," Tucker suggested hesitantly. "I'd hate to arrive at Circle T looking like I'd been dragged through a mud pit." "Wouldn't make the best first impression." April found herself smiling at the image. "No, I suppose not." She hesitated, then added, "I could use help repairing the barn roof. There's a leak above the hay storage that I haven't been able to fix." The offer hung between them, neither quite acknowledging that she was creating a reason for him to stay, if only for a few more hours. "I'm pretty handy with roof repairs," Tucker said finally, his eyes warming. "Least I could do after your hospitality." Emma's delighted squeal interrupted the moment as she came running into the kitchen, still in her nightdress. "Mr. Tucker, you're still here." She threw her arms around his legs in an impulsive hug. Tucker looked startled, then gently patted her back. "Just waiting out the rain, little lady." "Rain means no chores outside," Emma declared happily. "Can you tell me more cowboy stories?" "Emma," April chided gently, "Mr. Lawson isn't here to entertain you, and there are still indoor chores to be done." Tucker knelt to Emma's level. "How about this? You help your mama with the morning chores, and later, if the rain stops, I'll show you how Samson does tricks." Emma's eyes widened. "Your horse knows tricks." "Every good cowboy's horse knows at least 3 tricks," Tucker replied solemnly. "It's practically a rule." April couldn't help but smile at the interaction. There was a natural ease to the way Tucker spoke with Emma, treating her neither as a baby nor as an inconvenience. The rain continued throughout the morning, sometimes easing to a drizzle only to return with renewed force. April found herself unusually conscious of Tucker's presence as they moved around the small house, completing indoor tasks. His large frame seemed to fill the spaces in a way that should have felt intrusive but somehow didn't. By midday, the rain had finally stopped. Tucker disappeared to the barn to check on Samson and retrieve his tools for the roof repair. April took the opportunity to change into a clean dress still practical, but one of her better ones that she usually reserved for trips to town. When Tucker returned, he paused momentarily upon seeing her. Something flickered in his expression appreciation, perhaps before he quickly looked away. "Weather's clearing up nicely," he commented, his voice slightly rougher than before. Should be able to get that roof fixed before the next downpour. April watched from the ground as Tucker worked on the barn roof, his movements confident and sure. Emma stood beside her, clutching her doll and asking endless questions about how high the sky was and if Tucker could see their neighbor's farm from up there. "Mr. Tucker is very brave," Emma observed. "Papa was brave too, wasn't he?" April swallowed the sudden lump in her throat. "Yes, sweetheart, your papa was very brave. But Papa's not coming back," Emma continued, her young face serious. "Mrs. Henderson said he's with the angels now, forever and ever." "That's right," April confirmed softly. Emma considered this for a moment, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Will Mr. Tucker go away forever too?" The innocent question struck April with unexpected force. "Mr. Tucker has his own path to follow, Emma. He's going to work at Circle T Ranch." "But that's not so far away," Emma persisted. "He could visit, couldn't he?" Before April could form a response, Tucker called down from the roof. "All finished up here, no more leaks to worry about." As he climbed down the ladder, April noticed a long tear in his shirt sleeve, revealing a gash on his forearm. "You're hurt," she said, stepping forward instinctively. Tucker glanced at the wound as if noticing it for the first time. "Just caught it on an old nail, nothing serious." "It needs cleaning," April insisted. "Come inside and let me tend to it. Infections are nothing to trifle with." In the kitchen, Tucker sat patiently as April cleaned the wound with water and whiskey. She was acutely aware of their proximity, of the warmth radiating from him, of the strong pulse she could feel beneath her fingertips as she wrapped a clean bandage around his arm. "You have a gentle touch," Tucker observed quietly. Despite those calluses, April's hands stilled. Few people ever commented on her hands anymore, except occasionally the shopkeeper's wife in town, who had once remarked with poorly disguised disdain that April's hands looked more suited to a field hand than a lady. "These hands have done what was necessary," she replied, resuming her work. "There's no shame in that." Tucker surprised her by catching her wrist gently when she finished. He turned her palm upward, studying the calluses and small scars that mapped her struggles. "No shame at all," he agreed softly. "These are the hands of the strongest woman I've ever met." Their eyes met and something electric passed between them. April pulled her hand away first, suddenly flustered. "I should start supper." "And I should see to Samson," Tucker replied, rising from the chair, "and show Emma those tricks I promised." The sun was beginning its descent when April called them in for the evening meal. She'd prepared a simple supper of salt pork, beans, and cornbread, but had taken extra care with the presentation, using her good dishes instead of the everyday tin plates. As they ate, Tucker spoke of his plans at Circle T. Mr. Thornton's expanding his operation, bringing in new breeding stock from back east, looking to improve his herd. He needs experienced hands who know cattle and horses. "How long do you plan to stay there?" April asked, trying to sound merely conversational. Tucker considered the question. "Hard to say, depends on how things work out, but I've been thinking it's time to settle somewhere. A man gets tired of new horizons after a while. And what would make you stay in one place?" April found herself asking, immediately wishing she could take back the overly personal question. Tucker's gaze was steady. Roots, purpose, something worth building a future around. The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken possibilities. After Emma was asleep, April and Tucker sat on the front porch, watching fireflies rise from the grass as twilight deepened. The night was clear after the rain, stars appearing one by one in the darkening sky. "Creek should be passable by morning," April remarked, breaking a comfortable silence. Tucker nodded, his profile outlined against the deepening blue of the evening sky. "Likely so." Another silence stretched between them, this one laden with things unsaid. "Why did you really stop here yesterday?" April finally asked. "Circle T was your destination, there was no need to detour." Tucker turned to look at her, his expression open and honest. "I saw you from the road, working on that fence all alone, looking like the weight of the world was on your shoulders. I couldn't just ride past." Most people do, April said softly. They used to stop right after John died. Bringing food, offering help, but that faded. Now when I go to town, I see the way they look at me pitying the stubborn widow who won't admit she can't manage alone. Is that what you think I feel? Pity. April studied her calloused hands in the fading light. Why else would a man like you stop to help? Tucker shifted to face her more directly. A man like me, someone with prospects, someone young enough to start fresh without complications. She didn't need to elaborate. Her situation was obvious. A struggling widow with a young child, a rundown property, likely drowning in debt. Tucker was quiet for a long moment. My father used to say you can tell everything important about a person by looking at their hands and their eyes. His voice was low, reflective. The hands show what they've done, and the eyes show who they are. He reached over slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, and took one of her hands in his. His thumb traced the calluses along her palm with a gentleness that made her breath catch. These hands tell me about courage and determination, he continued. About a woman who refuses to surrender to circumstance, who protects what's hers with everything she has. His gaze lifted to meet hers. And those eyes. They tell me about a heart that's hurting but still has so much love to give. April felt tears threatening and blinked them back. You don't know me, Tucker. I'd like to, he replied simply, if you'd give me the chance. The directness of his statement startled her. What exactly are you proposing? Tucker smiled slightly. Nothing improper, April, just permission to call on you properly, to see where this might lead. You haven't even started at Circle T yet, she reminded him. Your life could go in any direction. True enough, he acknowledged. But some paths reveal themselves clearly, if a man's paying attention. He still held her hand, his touch warm and steady. April looked down at their joined hands, his larger one, marked with its own set of calluses and scars, cradling hers with a tenderness that made her heart ache. I stopped believing in new beginnings a long time ago, she admitted softly. Maybe it's time to reconsider, Tucker suggested, his voice equally quiet in the gathering darkness. In a gesture that seemed both deliberate and spontaneous, he raised her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her work-roughened palm. The unexpected tenderness of it brought a lump to April's throat. No one's ever done that before, she whispered. Tucker looked genuinely surprised. No one's ever kissed your hand, April shook her head. Not like that, not these hands. She flexed her fingers self-consciously, understanding dawned in his eyes. April, he said, his voice soft but firm, these hands are beautiful to me precisely because they show your strength. I wouldn't change a single callus. The weeks that followed took on a rhythm April hadn't experienced since before John's death. True to his word, Tucker rode to Circle T the next morning to secure his position. Mr. Thornton, impressed by Tucker's references and experience, hired him immediately. Circle T was only a few hours' ride from April's homestead, allowing Tucker to visit every Sunday and occasional weekday evenings. Each time he arrived, Emma would run to greet him, and Samson would nicker in recognition of the little girl who always had an apple or carrot saved for him. Tucker approached their courtship with the same dedication he showed in his work. He never arrived empty-handed, sometimes bringing practical items like coffee or sugar. Other times small treasures like ribbons for Emma's hair or a book of poetry April had once mentioned enjoying. The first time Tucker joined them for Sunday service in town, April felt the curious stares and whispered comments from the other parishioners. Mrs. Henderson, the banker's wife who had been particularly vocal about April's stubbornness in maintaining the ranch alone, made a point of approaching them after the service. April, dear, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, how lovely to see you finally accepting some assistance. We've all been so worried. Before April could respond, Tucker tipped his hat politely. Madam, I'm the fortunate one here. April's teaching me more about ranching this side of the territory than I could learn in years elsewhere. Mrs. Henderson's smile faltered. Oh, I was under the impression you were helping at her place." "We help each other," April interjected, finding courage in Tucker's steady presence beside her. "That's what neighbors do, isn't it, Mrs. Henderson?" The older woman's lips pursed slightly before she excused herself, clearly dissatisfied with the exchange. As they walked toward their wagon, April noticed Tucker struggling to suppress a smile. "What's so amusing?" she asked. "You," he replied. Standing there like a queen putting her subject in place, it was something to behold. April felt her cheeks warm. "I've bitten my tongue around that woman for 2 years." Tucker helped Emma into the wagon before turning to assist April, though they both knew she needed no help. It was simply a reason to touch, a brief moment of connection as his hands spanned her waist and her hands rested on his shoulders. "Perhaps it's time people around here remembered who April James really is," Tucker suggested as he lifted her easily onto the seat. His words stayed with her long after they parted that evening, Tucker returning to the bunkhouse at Circle T, April lying awake in her bed. Who was April James, really? For so long she'd defined herself by loss and survival. Widow, mother, struggling rancher, but in Tucker's eyes she saw possibilities she'd thought forever closed to her. As autumn painted the landscape in golds and russets, Tucker's visits became more frequent. He began staying for supper several times a week, often lingering afterward to help with evening chores or simply to sit with April on the porch, talking until the stars emerged. Emma blossomed under the attention Tucker showed her, eagerly sharing her discoveries and asking endless questions that he always answered with patience and genuine interest. One evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Tucker sat unusually quiet beside April on the porch steps. "Something troubling you?" she asked, noting the furrow between his brows. He turned to her, his expression serious. "Mr. Thornton offered me a promotion today, foreman position." April's heart sank even as she tried to smile. "Tucker, that's wonderful. You've certainly earned it." "It comes with the old Whitman cabin on the north side of his property," Tucker continued. "It needs work, but it's solid, room enough for a family." The implication hung in the air between them. "You'd be a fool to turn it down," April said softly, looking away to hide the emotion in her eyes. Tucker gently turned her face back toward him. "I told him I needed to discuss it with someone important before giving my answer." "Who?" April asked, then immediately felt foolish as Tucker's expression softened into tender exasperation. "You," he said simply. "You and Emma." April's pulse quickened. "Why would your job depend on us?" Instead of answering directly, Tucker reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object. In the fading light, April could see it was a smooth, heart-shaped stone similar to the one Emma had shown him that first day, but larger. "Found this by the creek last week," he explained. "Made me think about how Emma's been collecting these tokens for you. Little pieces of beauty to remind you that life goes on." He placed the stone in her palm, closing her fingers around it. "I've been collecting moments with you, April. Storing them up like treasure. The way you laugh when Emma says something clever, how you hum when you're kneading bread, the fierce look in your eyes when you're defending what's yours." April could scarcely breathe as Tucker continued, his voice deepening with emotion. "I love you, April James. I love your strength and your stubbornness. I love your calloused hands and the tender heart you try to hide. I love Emma as if she were my own, and I'm asking hoping that you might consider joining your life with mine." Tears spilled over April's lashes. "Tucker, my place is falling apart." "The mortgage can be managed," he interrupted gently. "Together, I've been saving, the foreman's position pays well, we have options, April. People will talk," she protested weakly. "They'll say you're taking on another man's burden." Tucker's eyes flashed with rare anger. "You are not a burden, you're a gift I never expected to find." His expression softened as he brought his hands to cup her face. "Let them talk, all that matters is what we know to be true." "And what's that?" April whispered. "That some things are worth building a life around," Tucker answered, echoing his words from months before. He took her work-worn hands in his and pressed his lips to each palm in turn. "I'm promising you forever, April, if you'll have me." In that moment, April felt the walls she'd built around her heart since John's death finally crumble completely. There would be challenges ahead, she knew. Combining their lives wouldn't be simple. But the thought of facing those challenges with Tucker beside her filled her with a hope she'd nearly forgotten was possible. "Yes," she whispered, her voice growing stronger as certainty filled her. "Yes, Tucker, I'll have you." His smile was brilliant in the gathering darkness as he pulled her close, sealing their promise with a kiss that spoke of new beginnings and healing and the forever they would build together. The following spring brought renewal to more than just the land. April and Tucker were married in a simple ceremony at the small church in Cottonwood Springs, with Emma serving as flower girl, proudly scattering petals before her mother walked down the aisle. They had decided to combine their resources, selling April's struggling property to a young couple eager for their own start, and using the proceeds to renovate the foreman's cabin on Circle T land. Mr. Thornton, impressed by Tucker's work ethic and April's determination, had offered them an opportunity to earn shares in the ranch over time, a future they could build together. On the evening after their wedding, as Emma slept peacefully in her new bedroom, April stood with Tucker on the porch of their cabin, looking out over the land that would nurture their future. "Happy, Mrs. Lawson?" Tucker asked, his arms encircling her from behind. April leaned back against his solid warmth, her hands still calloused, but now adorned with a simple gold band resting on his forearms. "More than I ever thought possible again." Tucker turned her in his arms to face him, his eyes reflecting the same wonder she felt. "I keep thinking about that day I first saw you, fighting with that fence all alone. Divine intervention," April suggested with a smile, "or just a fortuitous splinter?" "Either way," Tucker said, taking her hands and pressing a kiss to each palm as had become his habit. "I thank God every day for leading me to you." April rose on tiptoe to kiss him properly, no longer self-conscious about her work-roughened hands as they cradled his beloved face. They were hands that had known grief and struggle, yes, but now they held something infinitely precious. A second chance at love and the promise of forever.